If I walk around my neighborhood, I see the same shape, repeated over and over again. It's mostly on doors, front doors and screen doors, but also shutters and little architectural details, and garage doors. So many garage doors. It's even in my shop. I go through this door 20 times a day, and I never think about this shape right here. It's so common that you might never have noticed it. But it's the same thing every time. A square or rectangle with beveled edges and a sharply defined center section, and the whole thing is captured inside a frame. It's called a raised panel, and it's not decorative, or at least it didn't start out that way. The raised panel solves one of the biggest problems in construction: wood movement. Wood is always changing shape. It absorbs moisture out of humid air and expands, and when the air dries out, wood loses water and shrinks. Even wood that's been painted or sealed still does this. It's always expanding and contracting. And the shrinking and swelling is bad enough, but wood also warps. It can bow along its length, it can crown across its width, or it can twist, so the ends aren't parallel anymore. And if you're trying to build something out of wood, this is all pretty inconvenient. One of the earliest ways of solving this problem was just nailing stuff together, like on this nailed chest. Nails can flex, so they allow wood to shrink and swell, but nailing boards together keeps them from bowing or twisting. This chest is over 400 years old, and still square and solid, but I bet you can see the problem. It's that lid. Centuries of shrinking and swelling have warped it horribly. It doesn't even close anymore. It's the same problem with doors. You can't just have a plank of wood floating in midair. It's going to move and warp and stop working. If only there were a way to put a frame around that door or lid to hold it flat. Well, early woodworkers were pretty smart, and they started doing exactly that. Take the piece of wood for a door, shrink it a little bit, and then put it in a frame. But, and here's the real killer innovation, the frame is connected at the corners with joints and glue, but this center section, which we call the panel, isn't attached to the frame in any way. No nails, no glue. Instead, there's a groove around the inside of the frame, and the panel sits a little loose in the groove. So when it gets humid and that panel expands, there's room. But the frame also holds the panel flat, so it can't bow or twist. Once you get the concept down, it's pretty easy to see this as the door or lid for any piece of furniture, or even the door to your house. But then you might look at it and think, wait a second, why not just make a whole piece of furniture just from this construction? Historically, nails were expensive, so if you get rid of the nails and make the whole thing from panels in a frame, you'd save money. It also looks cool. Imagine a chest as a set of boards. Now, shrink the boards and make them into panels and put a frame around each one. Compared to a box that's just nailed together, this is much more elegant. If you're making furniture professionally, you can charge more money for this because rich people will want it. Early frame and panel stuff just had a flat panel with no decorative edge because that's easy to make. And the flat panel is also a classic look. But you also want to use a pretty thick panel because that's more durable. You've just got to thin down that edge, just enough so you can jam it into that frame. You might think woodworkers would make a neat little shelf on that edge. We call this a rabbet, and it would fit that groove perfectly. But time is money, and that's actually too much work. The easiest way to do it was just hack a bevel into that edge with an axe or a hand plane. It doesn't matter if that edge has a slope as long as it's thin enough to fit into the groove. So early furniture makers would just take whatever tool and blast away enough material to get the fit. This was rough work, and no one thought about making those bevels look good. Remember that chest we just looked at? Check out the inside of the lid. Look at those sloppy, uneven edges. This was normal for a long time, from the Middle Ages up through the Jacobean period. Oh, and I'm thinking about turning this video into a whole series called The Secret History of Wood. If you'd like to see more videos about, like, who invented dovetails or where did sandpaper come from, Go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Now, this rough, beveled panel with a flat face was the standard for centuries. But eventually, someone made those bevels even and smooth, with nice, crisp corners. And that woodworker thought, hey, we should flip that panel around and show those details off. Introducing the raised panel. It's exactly like the flat panel, but flipped around to show off those smooth, even bevels. It adds a ton of visual interest with roughly the same amount of work. This type of panel became especially popular in England in the 1660s, when Dutch influence made furniture much fancier and more stylish. But there's one more step in the evolution of this style. Here, the border between the bevels and the center of the panel is kind of fuzzy and indistinct. The last thing is to add a sharp edge all around the inside of the panel. Now, that inside section is called the field, and the whole thing is called a raised and fielded panel. And this classic look is everywhere in Western culture. It isn't just on furniture and doors. You can find entire rooms built from raised and fielded panels. And all of this made perfect sense when we were still building everything out of solid wood, and wood movement was a constant problem. But what about my shop door? I mean, it's not made out of wood, not even close. Why does it still look like an antique wooden door from an 18th century house? Well, most of it is just looks. I mean, you can buy a plain flat door, but it's really boring. If you just mold in some of these frame and panel details, the whole door looks a lot more classy and elegant, not like a cheap fiberglass door, which is what it actually is. These details just give a subtle feeling of class and dignity to something that would otherwise be very bland and boring. But there's another super important reason that the frame and panel style keeps hanging around. Light. Early furniture builders were masters of light and shadow. They understood how light falling across certain details could create dramatic effects. Look at this single panel from my garage door. It's a classic raised and fielded panel, and we've seen it a million times. But look at how the morning light separates the shape into distinct sections and creates shades of color. The whole thing is white, but that slanting light creates a brilliant white, a softer and more cream-colored white, a subtle gray, and a dark gray that's almost black. The raised panel shape interacts with natural light to make a whole palette of colors. It gives huge visual interest to something that could just be a boring, flat surface. I think most people go through more or less their entire lives without ever noticing raised panels, even though they're all around us. But what's cool about this detail is once you see it, you can't unsee it. And now I bet you'll look around your home and your neighborhood and see raised panels everywhere. It's actually cool once you learn how to look for them. And if you're new to this channel, we mostly teach accessible, low-cost hand tool woodworking. So when we come back, our next video is going to be a complete tutorial on how to make raised panels in frames with basic low-cost tools, mostly a jack plane and a rabbet plane, but not a jackrabbit plane, which is an actual tool. Gee, that got kind of weird. Anyway, you might want to see more videos in the secret history of wood. We're thinking about turning this into a whole series. Turns out there's all sorts of crazy, interesting details that even most woodworkers don't know about the history of woodworking. And I didn't know about any of them either until I started reading books about the history of woodworking. I could do a bunch of different stuff, so let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see more of these videos. Patreon.com/Rex Krueger. Our patrons are our #1 source of financial support for these videos. We would not be here without them, and we give them a ton of rewards. Like last week, they got an exclusive video on how to weave the seat for a traditional Appalachian chair. That was a full-length video just for patrons. We do a lot of stuff for them because they are the people who make these videos possible. If you'd like to be one of those people, go on over to patreon.com/Rex Krueger and check out all the rewards we have for our patron community. We'll see you next time for our raised panel hand tool tutorial. Thanks so much for watching.